Next speaker, Karen Schoen, is the director of the Panhandle Patriots, and the woman never sleeps. What can I say? She is the face behind Agenda21Today.com. She works 24/7 trying to get Agenda 21 out of this country. So she's going to talk to you about the 4 E's that drive Agenda 21. Karen?
This has been a wonderful conference, and I want to thank Rita Holt for the magnificent job that she has done, and the 912 Lakeland Group for hosting us. This was fabulous. And all of the agenders, and I hope all of you people in this room who will now become agenders, because what you have learned will stop only when you make it stop. It will not stop if you walk out of this room and do nothing. So we have a choice, as we do in life. And a person can only do one thing at a time. You can choose to do nothing, or you can choose to act. And it is our hope that you will join us in action. How are they accomplishing all of these things, and who are these people, and what are they doing, and why? We need a new paradigm of development in which the environment will be a priority. World civilization as we know it will soon end. We have very little time. We must act. If we can address the environmental problem, we will have to have it done within a new system, a new paradigm. We will have to change our mindset, the very way humankind views the world. That was Mikhail Gorbachev. It took me a long time to realize that America is really at a crossroad. And the concept of Agenda 21, sustainable development, is not really a bad thing. After all, who doesn't want to save the environment? Nobody wants to kill little animals. Everyone wants to have an abundance of food. Technology is a wonderful thing, and when used for an advantage, it is the best. However, as I said before, the world is made up of good people and evil people. And when a good concept gets into the hands of truly evil people, it becomes truly evil. And that's what this is about. Agenda 21 is probably the most evil plan ever written anywhere, ever. And it is the end game that they are trying to achieve, because the whole goal is jealousy. I have it, you can't. Do as I say, not as I do. I want to control you, and you and your children are the wards of the state. That's the concept, that's the thinking, that's the approach. And if we walk out of this room and do nothing, I will guarantee you, within 20 years, your children will be slaves to the state. Today we have a choice. We can be one nation under God, or we can be one nation under the United Nations. The choice is ours. And when anybody asks me, how did this happen? I tell them, look in the mirror, because we're the ones that let it happen. A massive campaign must be launched to de-develop the United States. De-development means bringing our economic system into the line with the realities of ecology and world resources situation. That was Paul Ehrlich, and he is a professor of population studies. I'm reading you their words because it's very important for you to understand the way they think. They do not value life, they value nature. Life is unimportant. Human beings, that's us, we are called useful idiots. And the new terminology, if you listen to the TV, you will hear that we are human capital. That's what they think of our kids, human capital. That's what they think of us. We are not here for any purpose other than to serve the state. Their ideology is based on Marxism, which is the truest form of communism, whereby the state controls everything and there is only room for two classes. The American middle class cannot exist in order to complete the New World Order. I envision the principles of the Earth Charter to be a new form of the Ten Commandments. They lay the foundation for a sustainable global Earth community. Again, Mikhail Gorbachev, and this is what he said after he wrote the Earth Charter. Individual rights will have to take a back seat for the good of the collective. That little gem came from Harvey Rubin. Harvey Rubin is the Miami-Dade clerk of courts and has been responsible for stealing, because I can't think of a better word to use, stealing land from individuals and stealing their private property. It is the goal that all private property must be put back in the hands of the state, and the majority of the private property must go back to wilderness wildlands. This you've heard before. Current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, that's what we are, we're the affluent middle class, such as golf, high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, automobiles, appliances, home and work air conditioning, suburban housing, are not sustainable. That was from Maurice Strong. He was the Secretary General of the UN. The assault on the middle class, the assault on the American economy is the main goal of this objective. Why? Because if the American middle class was allowed to exist, it would then become a role model for the rest of the world, and that is something that cannot happen. The American middle class must be eliminated. And by elimination, they feel that the rest of the world will then conform, and the workers will be able to serve the elite, because that is their function and purpose. They must take down the American economy, and they must destroy the American middle class. This is the table of contents of this Agenda 21, 40 chapters. On the other side, this is what it tells you, but what they really mean. Because one thing that you discover when you start reading their work is that they never mean what they say. They lie, they cheat, and they steal, because to them, the ends justify the means. As long as they can come out with their predetermined end, which means they win, you lose, they have no compunction about lying. Now, usually they talk about the 3 E's of Agenda 21, but I like to include the 4th E, and that is education. Because without education, this plan will not work. And in order for education to work, it must become indoctrination and not education. It's very difficult to take a fact and say, that table is pink. No, it's not. It's aqua. We all know that. If I can get 5 people in this room to determine that that table is pink, that consensus will then be formed and that table will be pink, and the new society will believe that the table is pink. This is the way every single every single regulation and every single rule that comes out of the UN is based like that. Global warming, as you heard, and as you heard from John Casey, is actually global cooling. But the concept that man has control over the climate, well, when I was in school, we learned that it was the sun. When you were in school, you learned that it was the sun. Our children today learn that they are responsible for changing the climate on the earth. If you took a string and went totally around the equator, and you took a pin and you put that pin down on the string, that might be the effect that man has on the climate. Every single plan, policy, development, regulation, and rule is based on phony science. And yet it will continue and continue and continue, and we in this room will fund it unless we do something about it. They use equity, and that is the law to restructure human nature. And we've heard today that they have used laws like the Endangered Species Act to eliminate individual freedom, because to them, species are more important than the individual. Now, are species more important than the individual?
No.
No. Are species more important to them than the individual? No. It's used for control, control, control. That's what all of these acts and all of these rules are made for. The economy, the American economy, must be destroyed. That's being done through redistribution of American wealth. And as we are sitting here today, yesterday, our president, we'll use that term loosely, our president is giving our money not to help the people in America, but to help the people in foreign countries, to promote his agenda in foreign entities, and to make sure that by the time he leaves office, the American people will be on the welfare rolls and at the beck and call of the government, because that's the goal. If you put people on the roll of the government and they depend on the government, then it's very highly unlikely that they will ever vote that government out of office, because they depend on that government for their existence. If we allow the program called Race to the Top to continue in our schools, within 6 years, we will never see a Republican again in office. Because within 6 years, those children will graduate. They will become voters, and there will be more of them than there will be seniors, because it is their goal to make sure that the seniors die quickly. Why? Because we question, and we are still the ones that have had a real education. We know how to reason, we know about logic, we know about statistics, and we can read maps and charts. Today's children feel good about education, they feel good about math, they feel good about science, but they could never do statistics, read a chart, or even understand the simple concept of numbers. We are creating years and years of a dumbed-down education, which creates a dumbed-down society, which we now have sitting in Washington. This was not an accident. This was deliberate. And this was done so that today we have a group of congressional leaders who will sit in Congress and say, debt, that's a good thing. The one with the most debt is the winner. How can they say that? That's because that's what they're taught in school. The environment, well, you've heard, they believe in the Gaia religion, that's G-A-I-A, where Mother Nature is elevated to the status above man. We know that if man was taught properly, and man understood nature, and man owns his own property and has his freedom, man will take care of nature. Nature cannot take care of man. The concept is for man to disappear and become depopulated, as you saw. Bring the population down. Why? For no other reason other than it's much easier to control. It's a lot easier to control 1 billion people than it is to control 6 billion people. So that when you hear depopulation, it's not because of the environment, and it's not because of sustaining anything. It is because of control. Their goal and objective is control, control, control. The common enemy of man, of humanity, is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fill the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through these changed attitudes and behaviors that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. That was written by the Club of Rome. They are the authors of these documents. This is what your children are learning in school. They are learning that they are the enemy of the earth and must be punished for doing damage to the earth, and therefore must not live the way we do. Luxuries like an automobile, luxuries like air conditioning, luxuries like having meat are unacceptable. And your children will take that because that's what they are being taught in school. They will then become the legislators who will make laws and who will outlaw automobiles and meat and single-family houses and all of the other items that has made America great. But most important, they will outlaw thinking, and they will only become drones capable of making a choice of what the government gives them. They use warm, fuzzy words because they felt that if they used the truth, we would repudiate it. So they have dreamed up a list of nice-sounding words that they feel the population can handle as they go forth with their agenda. The ultimate goal of education is indoctrination. Mark Tucker, a communist, wrote in the late 80s a letter to Hillary Clinton where he described that it is the sole purpose of education to train people to work for the state. Today, that is the model of Race to the Top. There is no purpose of education other than to train students to do the job that the state will regulate for them to do. So the way that it works with a public-private partnership is that the state makes a law. That law then will regulate a product. The companies who donate to the regime, whether it's Democratic or Republican, will then get the reward and get subsidies for the manufacture of that product. The other companies that either donate to the wrong side, whichever it happens to not be in office, will then be forced out of business. That will eliminate competition. Then our government, who has determined what the new product is going to be and has determined what corporation will then produce that product, will then go and train your child to work for that corporation, which is partially owned by the government. Our legislators will know in advance, and it is because of that that they have become massively rich, as they make regulations that, if they were on Wall Street, would be considered insider trading. A regulation is made, they will invest in that industry, their relatives will invest in that industry, and as you saw yesterday, subsidies will be paid to the family, like Nancy Pelosi, her brother-in-law, is getting $747 million for his, quote, solar company, when we all know that solar is not ready for prime time. Dianne Feinstein, her family, is getting $300 million. 500? 10 million. Oh, okay. However, that's the way the program works. Our legislators do everything they can to improve themselves. They are not interested in us and who then becomes the winner. In the case of education, it is the Gates Foundation and George Soros Foundation. As the Gates Foundation will now produce the books, they will produce the material, they will write the tests, they will produce the teacher evaluation, they will then create the assessments, because we're not giving tests anymore. A test is a measure of a fact, an assessment is a measure of value. Our children will then have to learn the values of what is being taught in school so that they can then regurgitate the same thing on their test. In the meantime, the Gates Foundation will then evaluate. So they are writing the materials, producing the materials, doing the technology, doing the data, doing the textbooks, and then evaluating those same materials. You tell me how that's going to work out. And then Bill Gates has the audacity to go to Congress and say to Congress, we need more H-1B visas because our students are not smart enough. How did the education part work out? Well, if you remember back to the 60s, in the 60s, we had a lot of devastation between John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and the war. The children were hostile, they were angry, they were anti-everything. And as you learned from Chris Ann before, John Dewey wrote a marvelous plan of how to make our kids dumb. And the educators who believed in this dreamed up a wonderful program to get this implemented in the schools. And that was called the draft. What was draft exempt? Teaching. Where did all these kids go? Into school. What did they do? They taught our children how to hate America. UN Agenda 21 is anti-equity. They must divide and conquer. That is the only way they can be successful. That is why we have African Americans, Black Americans, Latino Americans, Christian Americans, Jewish Americans, Islamic Americans. No one is an American first. If we were Americans first, it would be impossible for them to divide us. But by giving us labels and pitting us against each other, it makes it easy for them to keep us apart. And when we are apart, we don't talk, and therefore we don't have meetings like this, and we don't know what's going on. They also use phony science, and they lie, And they will, at any expense, avoid any type of confrontation. They will demonize the person or the group. They will never demonize the ideology. Why? Because their ideology does not work. Truth works. Facts matter. The ideology of the left or of the elite is designed not to work. That's why the solar companies will go out of business. They are designed that way. They have no beginning, they have no end, they cannot work. They were designed never to work. They were designed with one purpose in mind, and that purpose was to redistribute the wealth out of the United States. Which leads to our anti-free market economy, which I always found very interesting because Maurice Strong made his money in oil. George Soros made his money in oil. What are they demonizing? Oil. Why are they demonizing it? Because they have it and they don't want anybody else to. It's very simple. It's a very, very selfish ideology, but that's what it is. The environment must come before man because that is the only way to control man. And again, that is what this was all about. Power and control. And the end result will be, we will be herded into communities called sustainable developments. We will be told where to go, what to do, how to eat, what to eat, how to travel. Of course, cars have no desire for cars. That's why they're letting the railroads fall apart. They're letting the roads fall apart. The cars, no desire. Bicycles, how exciting. I asked one of my congressmen who told me that he was for sustainable, I asked him when I could go in his office and shut off the air conditioning. He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, obviously you don't know what it is that you're talking about because air conditioning is not sustainable." What we have to do is hold them accountable based on facts. We have to, you were asking before, and now this is the time where we learn what we have to do. If you open up your folders, inside your folders, there's two pieces of paper. One is a yellow postcard, and one says Paul Revere. Paul Revere is a flyer on the left side, and the postcard is on the right side. Every congressman that I spoke to, every senator that I spoke to said the same thing. When I said, why aren't you holding the EPA accountable? Why aren't you asking them for the scientific data that will support that regulation? Why aren't you telling them, where is your financial information? And their answer to me was the same. The American people, they don't care, they're not asking. So if they don't care, why should we care? As a result of that, we have come up with a plan. And that plan is through Operation Paul Revere. The first thing that we're going to be doing is holding a rally on the 24th of October. That is UN Day. And UN Day is the day that the UN was created. So it is a perfect time to start looking at its demise. We are asking that on that day, if you can, join us in Tallahassee. If you cannot, please wear red, white, or blue that day. That day we will not be Tea Partiers or 9/12. We will be Americans. Because that's one of the things, remember I said, the press likes to do. And that's one of the things that we don't want to give them ammunition. So on that day, we are all Americans. We are not hyphenated Americans. We are not divided Americans. We are Americans. And our demands are very simple. Get the U.S. out of the UN and get the UN out of the U.S. And it is with our voices that we can make this happen. And I can tell you that for a fact because we have been working very closely with Senator Rubio's office. And in the last 2 weeks, he has come out with a letter discussing the unconstitutionality of Race to the Top. And yesterday, he came out with a letter against the EPA. Our voices work when we use them. They don't work when we're silent. And we have no time left to be silent. We have 1 year left to do the best job of educating as many people as we possibly can. The postcard that's in the folder says, it's the Gadsden flag, and it says, "Don't tread on me." And what we'd like everyone to do is get a slew of those postcards. Join Operation Paul Revere on agenda21today.com, and every week between November 1st and the next election, we will send a postcard to Congress. Everybody, every week, same message. Each week we'll pick a new message. We will send the postcard to Congress, and we will send the postcard to our state leaders. And each week we'll pick a new message. But if we all say the same thing, and we all send the same postcard, it's very difficult to see that we're divided. So I thank you. I have a couple of announcements before I leave. Tom DeWeese is going to be speaking on November 15th. Tom DeWeese has been fighting Agenda 21 for the last 25 years. He's a marvelous man and a wonderful speaker. This is an educational process. This is not something that you can come to one seminar and walk away and say, wow, I know everything. It's taken them years, hundreds of years, to get this program done. We're not going to be able to tackle it in one day. However, each and every one of you has one thing in your life that you're passionate about. And we're requesting that that is the topic that you look at. Because every single thing that you're doing is going to be undone by Agenda 21. If you were a teacher, join us as a teacher. If you were an electrician, join us as an electrician. We don't care. It doesn't make any difference. But learn about Agenda 21. Learn about how it is affecting your life, your community, how it's stealing your individual freedom and property rights, and how it is constricting our life. And you can become an expert. You can talk about your topic. You can invite a few friends over to see and save our country. Because if we spend the next year watching American Idol and other mindless TV, by the end of the year, we won't have a country left to worry about. It is our pleasure to be able to inform you about all these. Consider running for office. Encourage your friends, encourage your family. Believe me, the people who are in office today, you know more than they do about a whole lot of things. And don't think that because you're retired doesn't mean that you shouldn't pay attention to the school board. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't go to a county meeting. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't run for the county. And doesn't mean that you shouldn't run for state office. This is a very easy year to run for a state office. And it's very important. And if you can't run, that's okay. You have a phone, you have a hand, you have a computer, and you got a great mouth. Pick up the phone and call your senators. Call your representatives. Mine are on speed dial, and when I call them, they say, hello, Karen. They're people, just like us. And the other thing that I learned when I talked to them, my senator is Greg Evers. I call him Greg. He works for me.
That's right.
My representative is Brad Drake. I call him Brad. He works for me. Stop giving them titles. Stop elevating them into a position of elite, because when you do that, that's the way they behave. We have to bring them down to our level. Be respectful, be truthful, be honest, but don't give them the opportunity to be better than you. We are equal. This is America. This information is on Agenda 21 today. The presentations will be on Agenda 21 today. There are DVDs in the back that we are selling that were from previous presentations and have other information in them. They're in the back also. Thank all of the vendors for coming. Thank you all for coming. Thank everyone. And most important, act. This is our last chance. Thank you all.